The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trail leading into Mercy's Bend, painting everything in shades of brown and rust. Eli Slater squinted against the glare, his weathered hands steady on the reins as he guided the cattle toward the stockyards. 3 days on the trail with barely any sleep had left him bone-tired, but that was nothing new. He'd been tired for years now, ever since the war ended and left him with nothing but ghosts for company. The cattle lowed and kicked up clouds of dust that coated his throat. Eli pulled his bandana higher, spitting to the side. The other hands rode spread out along the herd, keeping the beasts in line. They were good men, mostly, quiet types who didn't ask questions about a man's past, which suited Eli just fine. Mercy's Bend sprawled ahead like a cancer on the prairie. False-fronted buildings lined the main street, their painted signs already peeling in the harsh sun. The smell hit him first. Horse manure, rot-gut whiskey, and the peculiar stench of too many people crammed together in a place God never intended folks to settle. "Keep 'em moving steady," Eli called to Jake, the youngest hand. The boy nodded, eager to prove himself. Eli remembered being that young once, back when he thought honor and duty meant something. The war had beaten that foolishness out of him quick enough. They drove the cattle into the stockyard pens, and Eli left the others to handle the count while he collected payment from Henderson. The buyer. The man's office sat above the bank, all polished wood and velvet curtains that seemed obscene in this rough country. 38 head, as agreed, Eli said, placing the receipt on Henderson's desk. Henderson barely glanced up from his ledger. Prices dropped, $10 a head instead of 12. Eli's jaw tightened. "We had a deal. Market's changed. Take it or drive them back to your ranch." The old Eli might have argued, might have demanded what was fair, but fairness was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. He took the money and left without another word. The saloon beckoned from across the street. Eli had planned to head straight back to the ranch, but his throat felt like sandpaper and his muscles ached for just one drink. Just one. The lucky dollar was dim inside, a blessing after the glaring sun. Eli ordered whiskey and found a corner table where he could watch the door. Old habits. The war had taught him to never sit with his back exposed. He was nursing his second glass when the commotion started. A woman's voice, sharp with fear, cut through the usual saloon chatter. Eli kept his eyes on his drink, not his business. Nothing in this town was his business. "I said I'm not interested in your offer," the woman said. She stood near the bar, surrounded by 3 men Eli recognized as Barrett's boys. Barrett owned half the county and wanted the other half. "Now, Mrs. Whitmore," one of them said, his voice oily with false courtesy. "You being a widow and all, you need protection. Mister, Barrett's just looking out for you." "By trying to steal my land for 1/10 of its worth?" The man's hand shot out, gripping her arm hard enough to make her gasp. "Steal is an ugly word, ma'am, especially coming from someone whose husband died under such mysterious circumstances." Eli stared at the amber liquid in his glass. Not his business. He'd learned long ago that playing hero only got people killed, usually the hero. The woman tried to pull away, and the man backhanded her. The crack of flesh on flesh echoed through the suddenly silent saloon. She stumbled, catching herself on a chair. Eli was moving before he made the conscious decision to stand. His body remembered violence the way other men remembered how to breathe. "That's enough," he said quietly. The 3 men turned. The one who'd struck her, a weasel-faced fellow named Carver, smiled. "This ain't your concern. Drifter." "Reckon it is now." Eli positioned himself between them and the woman. He kept his hand away from his gun. No sense escalating things yet, but ready to move if needed. "You know who we work for?" another one asked. "Don't much care." Carver's smile widened. "You will." They might have pushed it further, but the bartender chose that moment to cock his shotgun behind the bar. "Take it outside. Boys, I just got these floors redone." The 3 men backed toward the door. Carver pointing at the woman. "This ain't over. Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Barrett's offer won't stay on the table forever." After they left, Eli turned to help the woman, but she was already straightening her dress. Chin lifted despite the red mark blooming on her cheek. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes the color of sage honey. Pretty in a sharp sort of way that suggested she'd cut a man as soon as look at him. "I didn't need your help," she said. "Seemed like you did. I can handle Barrett's thugs. By letting them knock you around," her eyes flashed. "By surviving, something you wouldn't understand." Eli almost smiled. It had been a long time since anyone had accused him of not understanding survival. "Suit yourself, ma'am." He returned to his table, but she followed. "Wait, I apologize. That was ungracious." "No need." She stood there a moment, studying him. Eli could feel her cataloging details, the scarred hands, the way he sat, the army colt on his hip worn smooth from use. "You're from the Carter Ranch," she said finally. "I've seen you in town before." Eli nodded, wishing she'd leave so he could finish his drink in peace. "I'm Clara Whitmore. I know who you are." Everyone knew who she was. Nathan Whitmore's widow. The banker had been found shot to death on the road to Cedar Falls 6 months back. Some said it was robbery. Others whispered darker theories, especially when his young wife inherited everything instead of his brother. "Then, I'm not very popular in this town," she said. "Can't say I pay much attention to popularity contests." She almost smiled at that. "Mr. Slater. Mr. Slater, I have a proposition for you." Eli drained his glass. "Not interested. You haven't heard it yet. Don't need to. I've got a job. Driving cattle for Sam Carter? How much does he pay you? 30 a month. 40 and found. I'll pay you 70. Plus a house on my property." That got his attention. $70 was foreman's wages. To do what? Manage my ranch and... She hesitated, then pushed on. "Provide security. You mean guard you from Barrett, among others." She touched her cheek unconsciously. "I've had to let most of my hands go. They were getting threatened, their families harassed. The few that remain aren't fighters. Neither am I." "No? Then what are you?" Eli stood. "A man who minds his own business. Find yourself another guard dog. Mrs. Whitmore." He left her there and headed for the door. Behind him, he heard her call out, "The offer stands if you change your mind." The ride back to the Carter Ranch took 3 hours. Eli spent them trying to forget Clara Whitmore's sage honey eyes and the way she'd stood straight despite being outnumbered and outmuscled. He'd learned long ago that brave women were dangerous. They made a man want to be brave too. And bravery was just another word for dying young. The ranch sprawled across a valley, neat and orderly under Sam Carter's management. It was a good place. Honest work, decent pay, and nobody asking questions about where a man learned to handle a gun like Eli did. He was unsaddling his horse when Sam found him. The older man leaned against the stable door, chewing tobacco. "Heard there was some trouble in town," Sam said. Word traveled fast. "Nothing to do with me. Heard different. Heard you stepped into something with the Whitmore woman." Eli concentrated on brushing down his horse. "Man can't have a quiet drink anymore." Sam spat tobacco juice. "That woman's poison. Eli, everything she touches turns to grief." "I'm not touching anything." "Good, because I'd hate to lose you. You're the best hand I've got." It was as close to sentiment as Sam ever got. Eli nodded his thanks, and Sam wandered off, leaving Eli alone with the horses and his thoughts. That night, lying in his bunk, Eli stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about Clara Whitmore. She was trouble walking on 2 legs. Anyone could see that. A woman who'd inherited her husband's fortune under suspicious circumstances, now fighting off wolves who wanted their share. Smart thing would be to stay far away from that mess. But he kept remembering the way she'd refused to cry when Carver hit her. The way she'd apologized for her harsh words, even though she hadn't needed to. $70 a month and a house of his own. Eli turned onto his side and closed his eyes. He'd survived the war by not caring about anyone but himself. It was a lesson written in blood and powder smoke, carved into his soul by watching better men than him die for causes that meant nothing in the end. Clara Whitmore would have to save herself. Eli Slater was done playing hero, but sleep, when it finally came, was filled with sage honey eyes and the sound of a woman refusing to break. The storm hit just after midnight, turning the world into a chaos of wind and water. Eli lay awake, listening to the rain hammer the bunkhouse roof, trying to convince himself the unease in his gut had nothing to do with Clara Whitmore. Thunder cracked like cannon fire, and he was back in Virginia for a moment. Mud and blood and boys screaming for their mothers. He sat up, shaking off the memory. 5 years since the war ended, but the storm still brought it back. A horse whinnied in distress, then another. Eli pulled on his boots and grabbed his slicker. Something was spooking the animals. Outside, the rain hit like cold needles. Lightning illuminated the ranch in stark flashes. The horses in the nearest corral were pressed against the far fence, ears flat with fear. Eli approached slowly, speaking low and steady. When he saw her, Clara Whitmore stood at the gate, soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her skull. She clutched the fence posts like they were the only things keeping her upright. "Mrs. Whitmore!" Eli had to shout over the storm. She turned, and in the next lightning flash he saw blood on her dress. "Mr. Slater, I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." Eli didn't think, just acted. He got her inside the barn where it was dry, lit a lantern. The blood wasn't hers, or mostly wasn't. Her hands were cut from what looked like broken glass, and there was a gash on her forehead. What happened? They came to the house, 6 of them, maybe 7. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. Broke windows, shot up the place, said next time they wouldn't miss. "Where are your ranch hands?" "Gone. The last 2 left yesterday after someone burned down Pedro's cousin's store." She laughed, a bitter sound. $70 a month isn't worth dying for. Apparently. Eli found some relatively clean rags and began wrapping her hands. She didn't flinch, just watched him with those sage honey eyes. "You rode here alone? In this storm? Would you prefer I'd stayed and let them finish what they started?" He had no answer for that. When he was done with her hands, he dabbed at the cut on her forehead. This close, he could smell lavender soap beneath the rain and fear. "You need to leave town," he said. "Go to San Francisco, Denver, anywhere but here. This is my home. Your home's going to get you killed." "Maybe." She caught his wrist as he pulled away. "That offer still stands. $70 in a house. Mrs. Whitmore. Clara. And before you say no again, consider this. They won't stop with me. Barrett wants the whole valley. The Carter Ranch will be next, or the one after that. At least with me, you'd be fighting for something. I'm done fighting for things. Then fight for the money. I don't care why you do it. Just help me." The barn door banged open. Sam Carter stood there with a shotgun, 2 other hands behind him. He took in the scene. Clara bleeding. Eli close enough to touch her. "Thought I heard something," Sam said. His voice was neutral, but his eyes were cold. "Mrs. Whitmore. Strange time for a social call." "She was attacked," Eli said. "So, she came here." Sam lowered the shotgun, but didn't put it away. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for your troubles, but I can't have you bringing them to my door. I've got my own people to think about." Clara stood, spine straight despite everything. "Of course, I apologize for the intrusion." "I'll saddle a horse," Eli said. "No need. Mine is outside. You can't ride back alone. Not tonight." Sam's face darkened. "Eli, I'll see her home and be back by dawn. You walk out that door with her. Don't bother coming back." The barn went quiet, except for the rain drumming on the roof. Eli looked at Sam, a man who'd been fair to him, given him work when others wouldn't hire a former Confederate. Then he looked at Clara, blood on her dress and steel in her spine. "Sorry to hear that. Sam." He saddled his horse while Clara waited. Neither of them spoke. Sam and the others left without another word. By the time Eli led his mount outside, the Carter Ranch had already begun to feel like part of his past. The ride to Clara's ranch took 2 hours through the storm. She led the way. apparently able to navigate by instinct even in the pitch black. Eli kept his hand near his gun, watching the shadows. The Whitmore ranch materialized out of the darkness like something from a nightmare. The main house stood wounded, windows shattered, walls pocked with bullet holes. A barn door hung off its hinges, creaking in the wind. "Home sweet home," Clara said dryly. They put the horses in what was left of the barn. Inside the house, broken glass crunched underfoot. Furniture lay overturned, and the walls were scarred with ugly words about Clara's virtue and probable fate. "There's a foreman's cabin out back," she said. "It's still intact. You can stay there." "And leave you in this shot-up house alone?" "I've been alone for 6 months. Mr. Slater, it's Eli. And that was before they decided to send messages with bullets." She lit an oil lamp, revealing the full extent of the damage. Her hands had started bleeding through the bandages. "There's a settee in the study that's still whole. You can sleep there if you insist on playing guardian angel." "I don't play at anything." While Clara disappeared upstairs to change out of her ruined dress, Eli investigated the house. It had been fine once. Expensive furniture, good wood floors, paintings on the walls. Now it looked like a battlefield. He found the study relatively untouched and dragged the settee to face the door. His Winchester was in his saddlebags. He retrieved it along with extra ammunition. If they came back tonight, they'd find a different reception. Clara returned wearing a simple gray dress, her hair braided back. She'd washed the blood from her face, but looked pale in the lamplight. "There's whiskey in the cabinet," she said. "What's left of it?" Eli found the bottle. Good Kentucky bourbon, not the rot gut they served in town. He poured 2 glasses and handed her one. She drank it like medicine. "Tell me about the water," he said. Her eyes sharpened. "What? The reason Barrett wants your land? It's always water out here." Clara studied him over her glass. "You're smarter than you let on. Just observant. There's an underground spring on the eastern section. Nathan discovered it just before he died. Enough water to irrigate the whole valley if properly channeled. And Barrett knows. Nathan made the mistake of trying to negotiate with him. Thought they could be partners." She took another sip. "My husband was many things, but he was naive about human nature." "What happened to him?" "Someone shot him on a lonely road, made it look like robbery, but his gold watch was still in his pocket." Her laugh was bitter. "The sheriff investigated for about 5 minutes before declaring it the work of drifters." "You think Barrett ordered it?" "I know he did, but knowing and proving are different things." They sat in silence, listening to the rain. The lamp cast dancing shadows on the walls. "Why didn't you remarry?" Eli asked. "Would have solved your problems. Trade one master for another." She shook her head. "Nathan was chosen for me by my father. A business arrangement. He was 45, I was 17. He wanted a young wife to give him sons and look pretty at social functions." "Did you love him?" "I barely knew him. We were married 7 years, and I doubt we had 7 real conversations." She stared into her glass. "When he died, I felt free, for the first time in my life. I could make my own choices. I won't give that up, not even to save my life." Eli understood that. The need to be free, to answer to no one. It was what had driven him west after the war. "Get some sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch. All night. Wouldn't be the first time." She rose, then paused at the door. "That's $70 a month. I can make it 80. 70's fair." "Then we have a deal?" Eli looked around the shot-up room, thought about Sam Carter's disappointment, about the wise choice being to ride away come morning. Instead, he found himself nodding. 1 month. We'll see how it goes." Something flickered in her eyes. Relief, maybe, or hope. "Thank you, Eli." After she went upstairs, Eli settled on the settee with his rifle across his knees. The storm was passing, but the night remained dark. He thought about the morning, about what he'd gotten himself into. 1 month, he told himself. Just long enough to earn some money and move on. Just long enough to help her find new hands. Shore up defenses. He wasn't getting involved. He was just taking a job. But as the night wore on and the house creaked around him, Eli knew he was lying to himself. He'd gotten involved the moment he'd stood up in that saloon. Maybe even before that. Maybe the moment he'd first seen Clara Whitmore refuse to break. The war had taught him that caring about people was a luxury he couldn't afford. But sitting in her shot-up house, keeping watch against the darkness, Eli wondered if maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe caring wasn't a luxury at all. Maybe it was the only thing that made surviving worth a damn. 3 weeks had passed since Eli moved to the Whitmore ranch. 3 weeks of fixing fences, clearing ditches, and watching the horizon for trouble. The work was hard but honest. And slowly the ranch began to look less like a battlefield. Clara proved to be unlike any woman he'd known. She worked alongside him without complaint, her hands growing calloused from handling tools and rope. When he'd suggested she might want to supervise from the house, she'd given him a look that could have peeled paint. "I'm not paying you to do my work for me," she'd said. And that was that. They'd hired 2 hands, Tom Brennan, a grizzled former cavalry sergeant who'd served with the Union, and Miguel Santos, whose family had worked cattle since before the Anglos came. Both men were too desperate for work to care about the ranch's reputation. This evening found Eli replacing boards on the barn while Clara tended the vegetable garden she insisted on maintaining. The sun hung low, painting everything golden. It was the kind of light that made even this harsh land look beautiful. "Riders coming," Tom called from his perch on the roof. Eli set down his hammer and checked his Colt. 4 men approached from the east. Not Barrett's usual thugs, but strangers. They rode good horses and wore their guns like men who knew how to use them. "Get to the house," Eli told Clara. "I'm fine where I am." "Clara, this is my land. I won't hide every time someone rides up." The riders stopped at the gate. Their leader, a thin man with pale eyes, touched his hat. "Evening. We're looking for Mrs. Whitmore." "You found her," Clara said, walking forward. Eli moved to stay between her and the strangers. "Ma'am, name's Wade Garrison. We represent certain interests in Denver. Heard you might be willing to sell." "You heard wrong." Garrison smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Now, let's not be hasty. We're prepared to offer a fair price, more than fair, considering the difficulties you've been having. My land isn't for sale. Everything's for sale. Mrs. Whitmore, it's just a matter of price." Eli studied the men. They sat too easy in their saddles, too relaxed, professional guns, not cowboys playing tough. The lady said no, he said quietly. Garrison's pale eyes shifted to him. "And you are?" "The man telling you it's time to leave. Now that's unfriendly. We came all this way to help Mrs. Whitmore with her problem." "We don't have a problem." Clara said, "No. Word in town is Barrett's boys have been giving you grief, making threats, shooting up your property." Garrison shook his head sadly. "Terrible thing, a woman alone trying to hold on to a ranch. So many accidents can happen." The threat was polished but unmistakable. These weren't Barrett's crude bully boys. These men were something else, smooth, professional, dangerous. "Accidents can happen to anyone," Eli said, "even men from Denver." Garrison studied him more carefully. "You've got the look of a man who's seen his share of trouble. Some. War, among other things. Then you know how these conflicts usually end. The smart man takes the money and walks away breathing. Good thing I never claimed to be smart." Tom had climbed down from the roof. Rifle in hand, Miguel emerged from the barn with a shotgun. The odds had shifted, but Garrison didn't seem concerned. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said. "We'll be in town for a few days. If you reconsider. We're staying at the Imperial. Our offer's generous, but it won't remain open indefinitely." He touched his hat again, and the 4 men wheeled their horses and left. Eli watched until they disappeared over a rise. "Denver interests," Clara said, her voice thoughtful. "Nathan mentioned something about a railroad consortium looking at land grants through here. Railroad would need water." "Exactly." She turned toward the house. I need to go through Nathan's papers again. There might be something I missed. They ate dinner in the kitchen, beef stew and cornbread. Simple fare that Clara insisted on helping prepare, despite having employed a cook in better times. The house felt different at night, shadows pooling in corners where the lamplight couldn't reach. "Tell me about the war," Clara said suddenly. Eli set down his spoon. "Not much to tell. You were Confederate? Does it matter?" "No, I want to understand." "Understand what?" Why you're here. Why you stay when you clearly don't want to be around people." Eli pushed his bowl away. "I joined up at 17. Thought it would be an adventure. Thought we'd whip the Yankees in a month and be home for harvest. What happened? Reality?" He stared at his hands. 4 years of it. Watching friends die. Killing boys who looked just like us, only wearing blue instead of gray. Following orders that made no sense from officers who got good men killed for nothing. Clara waited, not pushing. "There was this lieutenant, Marcus Cooper, good man from Georgia, had a wife and 2 daughters. We were at Cold Harbor, dug in behind earthworks. The order came to advance. Marcus knew it was suicide. We all did, but orders were orders. He could still see it, the morning mist, the Union lines bristling with rifles, the sick certainty in his gut. Marcus looked at me before we went over the top, said, 'Tell Sarah I loved her.' Then he was running, and I was running, and the world exploded. When the smoke cleared, Marcus was gone. Just gone. Not even enough left to bury." "I'm sorry. I found Sarah after the war. Told her what Marcus said. She thanked me, then asked why I lived when good men like her husband died. I didn't have an answer." Clara reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. "Maybe you lived so you could be here now." Eli pulled back. "I'm not a good man. Clara, I've done things—" He stopped. "I'm here for the money. Don't make it more than it is." She studied him with those sage honey eyes. "If you say so." Later, in the foreman's cabin, Eli lay awake thinking about her touch. Such a simple thing, but it had sent warmth through him he hadn't felt in years. Dangerous warmth. He was still awake when he heard footsteps on the porch. His hand found his gun before the knock came. "It's me!" Clara's voice, tight with fear. He opened the door. She stood there in a white nightgown and shawl, hair loose around her shoulders. "Someone's in the house." Eli pulled on his boots and grabbed his rifle. "Stay here." "Like hell." He didn't argue. They moved quietly toward the main house. A light flickered in the study window. Someone with a lantern. Eli eased through the kitchen door. Clara behind him, despite his silent gestures for her to stay back. The study door was ajar. Lamplight spilling out. He could hear drawers being opened, papers rustling. He kicked the door wide. Rifle raised. "Don't move!" The intruder spun, and Eli recognized him. Frank Morrison, Nathan Whitmore's brother, a weak-chinned man who'd always reminded Eli of a ferret. "Eli Slater," Frank said, trying for bravado. "Clara's hired gun. I should have known." "What are you doing here?" Clara demanded, pushing past Eli. "Getting what's mine. What you stole from me." "I didn't steal anything. Nathan left everything to me. You saw the will. A will you probably forged, or convinced him to sign when he was drunk." Frank's face twisted with years of resentment. 7 years of marriage and not one child. "What kind of wife?" "Careful," Eli warned. Frank noticed the rifle pointed at his chest and swallowed. "I just want the deed to the eastern section. The part with the spring. You can keep the rest." "Get out," Clara said coldly. "You don't understand. I owe money. Bad people. If I don't pay—" "That's not my problem. It will be when they come looking for payment. You think Barrett's bad? These men— Were they from Denver?" Eli asked. "Pale-eyed fellow named Garrison?" Frank went white. "You've met them." "They stopped by earlier." "Then you know what they're capable of." Frank turned desperate eyes on Clara. "Please, we're family. We were never family. You made that clear every time you called me a gold digger in town. I'll leave. Take the deed and go to California. You'll never see me again." Clara walked to the desk, pulled out a key, and opened a drawer. For a moment, Eli thought she might actually give in. Instead, she pulled out a piece of paper. "This is what you're looking for?" She held up the deed. "The thing Nathan died for?" "Yes, please, Clara." She walked to the fireplace and tossed the paper into the flames. "No!" Frank lunged forward, but Eli caught him, held him back as the deed burned. "There! Now no one can have it." Clara's voice was steady as stone. "Get out of my house! Frank, if I see you again, I'll let Eli shoot you!" Frank stumbled out, cursing and sobbing. They heard his horse gallop away into the night. "That was foolish," Eli said. "Was it?" Clara stared at the dying fire. "At least now they can't force me to sign it over. There are other copies. The land office. Let them try to forge my signature. I'll fight it. These aren't the kind of men you fight in court." She turned to face him, and in the lamplight she looked both vulnerable and fierce. "Then how do you fight them? You don't. You run or you die." "I won't run." "Then you'll die. Maybe." She moved closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap again. "Does that bother you? The thought of me dying?" It did. God help him. It did. More than it should. More than was safe. "I told you not to make this more than it is." "Then why are you here in the middle of the night protecting me? You're paying me to... Is that all?" She was too close. He could see the pulse in her throat, the way her lips parted slightly. It would be so easy to close the distance, to taste her mouth, to forget all the reasons this was a bad idea. Instead, he stepped back. "Lock your doors. I'll check the grounds." Disappointment flickered across her face before she masked it. "Of course. Good night, Eli." He left before he could change his mind. Outside, the cool night air helped clear his head. He walked the perimeter of the ranch, checking for signs of other intruders, but mostly trying to distance himself from the want that had risen in him. Clara Whitmore was getting under his skin. Her courage, her stubbornness, the way she looked at him like he was more than just another hired gun. It was dangerous, this feeling. The last time he'd let himself care about someone. They'd ended up dead because of it. He couldn't go through that again. Wouldn't. 1 month, he reminded himself. He'd given his word for 1 month. After that, he'd collect his pay and ride out, find some place where sage honey eyes couldn't haunt him, where the past couldn't catch up. But as he looked back at the house, saw Clara's silhouette in the window, Eli knew he was lying to himself again. He was already in too deep. The question now was whether either of them would survive it. The morning after Frank's intrusion dawned crisp and clear, but the air between Eli and Clara had changed. She was polite but distant at breakfast. Avoiding his eyes, he told himself it was better this way, safer for both of them. They worked in relative silence. Clara tending to the horses while Eli and Tom repaired the chicken coop. The ordinary tasks felt like a blessing, something simple and fixable in a world that grew more complicated by the day. It was Miguel who saw the dust cloud first. "Riders," he called from his position near the gate. "Many riders." This wasn't a small group of thugs. At least 15 men approached, and at their head rode Sheriff Dawson, Barrett's man through and through. Eli counted guns, calculated odds. Not good. "Tom, get to the roof with your rifle," he ordered. "Miguel, take the barn loft. Don't shoot unless I do." Clara emerged from the house, saw the approaching force, and her face went pale, but she walked to stand beside Eli at the gate, chin up. "Morning, Sheriff," she said as the group reined up. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Dawson was a thick-set man with a badge he'd bought rather than earned. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Mrs. Whitmore, I have a warrant for your man's arrest." "On what charge?" Eli asked. "Assault, threatening behavior, disturbing the peace." Dawson smiled. "Showing tobacco-stained teeth. Seems you roughed up some upstanding citizens in town. 3 weeks ago, and you're just now getting around to it? Wheels of justice turn slow sometimes." The sheriff's hand rested on his gun. "You coming peaceful? Or do we do this the hard way?" Clara stepped forward. This is ridiculous. You have no real evidence. Got 3 witnesses say different. Dawson's eyes never left Eli. What's it gonna be? Slater. Eli weighed his options. Fight, and people would die. Maybe Clara among them. Go peacefully, and he'd likely never make it to trial. Barrett's men had a way of ensuring prisoners tried to escape. I'll come, he said. But I want your word, Mrs. Whitmore won't be harmed while I'm gone. She's got nothing to worry about if she stays out of trouble. Eli unbuckled his gun belt, handed it to Clara. Their fingers brushed, and she gripped his hand briefly. Don't do this, she whispered. It'll be all right. They both knew he was lying. The ride to town felt like a funeral procession. Eli's hands were tied, a man on each side watching him close. He'd been in worse spots. He told himself, during the war, he'd escaped from a Union prison camp. This was just another cage to break out of. The Mercy's Bend jail was a small stone building with 2 cells. They shoved him into one, and Dawson personally checked the locks. Mr. Barrett will be by to see you later, the sheriff said. Might want to think about being cooperative. Could save you considerable pain. After they left, Eli tested the bars, examined the locks, looked for weaknesses. The jail was solid. Well built, no easy escape here. He'd been there maybe 2 hours when he heard commotion outside. Shouting. A woman's voice raised in anger. The door burst open and Clara stormed in, followed by a harried-looking deputy. I'm sorry, Sheriff, she wouldn't... It's all right, Jed. Dawson leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Whitmore wants to visit the prisoner. That's her right. 5 minutes. Clara waited until they were alone, then moved close to the bars. Are you hurt? I'm fine. Barrett's men are all over town. Celebrating. They think they've won. Maybe they have. Her eyes flashed. Don't say that. I've wired for a lawyer from Denver. A real one, not these local puppets. Clara, listen to me. You need to leave town. Today. Take what money you can and go. I'm not leaving you here. I'm not your responsibility. No? She reached through the bars, touched his face. Then what are you? The question hung between them, heavy with possibilities. Eli caught her hand, meaning to pull it away, but found himself holding on instead. I'm a fool, he said quietly, for thinking I could keep my distance, for believing 1 month would be enough. Eli, you asked me once if the thought of you dying bothered me. It does. It terrifies me. I've watched too many people I care about die. Clara, I can't. She pressed her fingers to his lips. I'm not dead yet. The door opened. Barrett himself walked in, dressed in his usual black suit that made him look like an undertaker. Appropriate, Eli thought, since the man dealt in death. Mrs. Whitmore, I heard you were here. Barrett's smile was oil on water. Come to say goodbye to your hired gun. He'll be released. I've hired a lawyer. Have you? How? Optimistic. Barrett studied Eli through the bars. You know, Slater, you impressed me that day in the saloon. Takes courage to stand up to 3 men. Stupid courage. But courage nonetheless. Get to your point, Eli said. My point is, I'm a businessman. I don't like waste. A man with your skills could be useful to me. Not interested. You haven't heard my offer. Work for me, and the charges disappear. Plus double what she's paying you. Still not interested? Barrett's friendly mask slipped. Then you'll hang. Make no mistake. I own this town. The judge, the jury, everyone who matters. You'll get your trial, all legal and proper, and then you'll swing. For a bar fight, that'll raise eyebrows even here. Who said anything about a bar fight? By the time we're done, you'll be guilty of murder. That banker, Nathan Whitmore, word is his widow hired a gunman to kill him. Planned the whole thing together. Clara went white. You wouldn't dare. Wouldn't I? 2 birds, 1 stone. Your hired gun hangs for murder. You go to prison as an accomplice, and your land comes up for auction. Guess who'll be bidding? You bastard, Clara breathed. Such language from a lady. Barrett turned to leave, then paused. Think about my offer. Slater. You've got until morning to decide." After he left, Clara gripped the bars so tight her knuckles went white. "He can't do this. Can't just manufacture evidence." "He can, and he will." Eli covered her hands with his. "Clara, you have to run. Please. No. Damn it, woman. This isn't the time for stubbornness." "I said no." Her voice was steel. "We'll fight this. Together." "There is no together. There's you being smart and living, or you being stubborn and dying." She laughed, a broken sound. "You think I'd be alive without you? Really alive? I'd be running forever, looking over my shoulder. Alone." Her eyes met his. "I was alone for 7 years in that marriage. I won't be alone again. Clara, I love you." The words hit him like a physical blow. He wanted to deny them, to push them away, but the truth was already clawing its way up his throat. "You can't. Too late." She pressed closer to the bars. "I've loved you since that night you sat in my shot-up house, keeping watch. Since you looked at me like I was worth protecting. Stop. Since you told me about Marcus Cooper and I saw the good man you're trying so hard to pretend you're not. Clara, please. Tell me you don't feel the same. Look me in the eye and tell me I mean nothing to you, and I'll walk away." He tried. God help him. He tried to form the words that would save her, but looking into those sage honey eyes, all he could manage was the truth. "I can't. Then we fight, together." She kissed him through the bars, awkward and desperate and perfect. For a moment, the cell, the town, the whole damned world disappeared. There was only Clara, warm and alive, and his. The door banged open. Deputy Jed stood there, red-faced. "Time's up, Mrs. Whitmore." Clara pulled back slowly. "I'll be back, with that lawyer. Clara, together," she said firmly. And then she was gone. Eli sank onto the narrow cot, head in his hands. Together. The word was a promise and a curse. He'd sworn after the war never to be responsible for another person's life, never to care enough that loss could destroy him. But Clara had slipped past his defenses like a thief in the night, stealing the heart he'd thought long dead. Now they were both trapped, her by stubbornness and love, him by iron bars and the certainty that Barrett would make good on his threats. The afternoon dragged on. Eli heard snippets of conversation from the front office. The judge was coming to town special for the trial. Witnesses were being coached. The gallows was being checked to make sure the trapdoor worked smooth. Near sunset, a commotion erupted outside. Gunshots, shouting, the thunder of hooves. Eli pressed against the bars, trying to see out the small window. The door burst open. Tom Brennan stood there, gun drawn, blood on his shirt. "Come on, boy, we're getting you out." "Tom, what?" "No time. Miguel's got horses outside." The old sergeant shot the lock off and Eli stumbled out. In the front office, Deputy Jed lay unconscious but breathing. "Clara?" Eli asked. "Safe. Hidden. Now move." They ran into chaos. Half the town seemed to be shooting at the other half. Eli saw some of Barrett's men exchanging fire with strangers, rough-looking men who fought with disciplined precision. "Who the hell?" "Denver lawyer brought friends," Tom said, grinning. "Seems he takes his job serious." They reached the horses. Miguel held the reins of a familiar black mare, Eli's horse from the ranch. As they mounted, Eli saw Sheriff Dawson running toward them, gun drawn. Eli was faster. His shot took the sheriff's gun, sent it spinning into the dirt. Dawson clutched his hand, cursing. "That's for the hospitality," Eli called, then spurred his horse. They rode hard into the gathering darkness, the sounds of battle fading behind them. But Eli knew this was far from over. They'd freed him, but at what cost? And where was Clara? The war had taught him that sometimes winning a battle meant losing the war, as they rode toward an uncertain future. Eli prayed this wouldn't be one of those times, because now he had something to lose, something worth fighting for, something worth dying for. They rode through the night, pushing the horses hard until Tom finally called a halt at an abandoned line shack in the hills. Clara was there, pacing like a caged cat, still wearing the green dress she'd worn to town. When she saw Eli, she ran to him. He caught her, held her tight enough to feel her heart racing against his chest. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she pulled back and slapped him hard across the face. "Don't you ever tell me to run again," she said fiercely. Eli touched his stinging cheek. "Yes, ma'am." The tension broke. Clara laughed, a sound caught between hysteria and relief, and kissed him properly. This time there were no bars between them, no barriers except the ones they'd built in their own hearts, and those were crumbling fast. "Hate to interrupt," Tom said dryly, "but we've got company." A lone rider approached, hands raised, in the moonlight. Eli recognized him, the Denver lawyer Clara had mentioned. Jonathan Hartley was a thin, bookish man who looked like he belonged in a library, not riding through hostile territory. "Mrs. Whitmore." Hartley dismounted carefully. "I apologize for the dramatic extraction, but when I arrived and learned of the situation, you did right," Clara said. "Though I didn't expect you to bring an army." "Pinkerton detectives. Actually, it seems your late husband had friends in Denver who've been watching Barrett's activities with interest. When I wired them about your situation..." He adjusted his spectacles. "Let's just say certain railroad interests don't appreciate Barrett's methods of land acquisition. So they sent guns," Eli said. "Insurance. The railroad consortium wants that water, Mr. Slater, but they want it legal. A range war helps no one." "Bit late for legal," Tom observed. "Half the town's shot up by now." Hartley smiled thinly. "On the contrary, tonight's events have given us exactly what we need. Sheriff Dawson is wounded, his deputies scattered. The territorial marshal is already on his way. By tomorrow, there will be a new law in Mercy's Bend." "And Barrett?" Clara asked. "Mr. Barrett is about to discover that his influence has limits. The evidence you gathered from your husband's papers, combined with testimony from several witnesses we've located, should be sufficient to charge him with fraud, intimidation, and conspiracy to commit murder." "You found witnesses?" Eli was skeptical. "Barrett owns this town. He owns the people who live in town, but the territory is full of those he's wronged, homesteaders he's driven off, ranchers he's cheated. We've been collecting their stories." "What about Eli?" Clara gripped his arm. "The charges against him will be dropped. Self-defense is not a crime, and once Dawson is removed from office, his arrests become questionable at best." It sounded too good to be true. In Eli's experience, things that sounded too good to be true usually were. But Clara was looking at the lawyer with hope in her eyes, and Eli found himself wanting to believe. "What do you need from us?" Clara asked. "Time. 2 days, perhaps 3. Stay hidden while we clean up the mess in town. Can you do that?" "We'll manage," Eli said. Hartley mounted his horse. "I'll send word when it's safe, Mrs. Whitmore. Soon you'll be able to return to your ranch without fear." After he left, they settled in for what remained of the night. The line shack was rough but solid. One room with a fireplace and a few pieces of broken furniture. Tom and Miguel volunteered to keep watch, leaving Eli and Clara alone inside. She sat by the cold fireplace, staring at nothing. The lamplight caught the tears on her cheeks. "Hey," Eli said softly, sitting beside her. "We're alive. We're free. Why the tears?" "Nathan," she said. "I've been so angry at him for so long. For the marriage, for dying and leaving me with this mess. But he didn't deserve to be murdered." "No, he didn't. I'm a terrible person. My husband is dead, and all I could think about was keeping the land, fighting Barrett. I never even mourned him properly." Eli took her hand. "You survived. That's what mattered." "Is it?" She looked at him with haunted eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm any better than Barrett, fighting over land, over water, getting people hurt." "Stop." He turned her to face him. "Barrett takes. You're trying to hold on to what's yours. There's a difference. Tom was shot tonight, because of me. Tom was shot because he chose to be. Same as Miguel, same as me. We're not children. Clara, we make our own choices. And you chose me. Wonder colored her voice. Even knowing what it might cost. Especially knowing. She studied his face. That night in the barn, when you wrapped my hands, that's when it started for me. You were so gentle. Nathan never... He wasn't cruel, just indifferent, like I was furniture he'd acquired. But you touched me like I mattered. You do matter. Show me. The request hung between them, loaded with meaning. They'd kissed, held each other, but this was different. This was a choice, a crossing of the last line between them. Clara, we might die tomorrow. Barrett might win, or the lawyer might be wrong, or 1,000 other things could go wrong. She stood, held out her hand. But tonight we're alive. Tonight we're together. Isn't that enough? It was. God help him. It was more than enough. Eli took her hand, drew her close. This kiss was different from the desperate one through the bars. Slower, deeper, a promise rather than a plea. There were old blankets in a trunk. They made a bed near the fireplace. The summer night warm enough without a fire. Eli had been with women before, quick, meaningless encounters in towns he'd never see again. This was nothing like that. Clara's hands shook as she unpinned her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. In the lamplight, she was beautiful and terrified and brave all at once. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted. Nathan, it was always quick, in the dark. He said proper wives didn't... Nathan was a fool, Eli said roughly. He showed her what Nathan hadn't, that desire could be tender, that touch could worship rather than take. She was shy at first, then bold, learning the landscape of pleasure like she'd learned everything else, with focused determination and surprising joy. Afterward, they lay entwined, skin cooling in the night air. Clara traced the scars on his chest, shrapnel from a cannon blast, a saber cut from a cavalry charge, the puckered mark of a bullet that had nearly found his heart. So much pain, she murmured. Old pain. Doesn't matter now? Everything matters. Every scar is a story, a moment you survived to be here with me. Romantic way to look at it. Practical, she corrected. If any of these had killed you, I'd have faced Barrett alone. I'd probably be dead or married to one of his creatures by now. Clara, no, let me finish. She propped herself on an elbow, hair falling like a curtain. I've thought about it so many times. What if you hadn't been in that saloon? What if you'd ridden away that night instead of staying? My life balanced on such small chances. Mine too, Eli admitted. I came west to die. I think, not actively seeking it, but not avoiding it either. Just existing until something finished what the war started. And now I want to live. He pulled her down for a kiss. Want to see you safe, your ranch thriving. Want to wake up with you every morning and know I've got something worth protecting. Even if I'm stubborn and refuse to run when you tell me to. Especially then. They made love again. Slower this time. Savoring each touch. The shack's thin walls meant they had to be quiet, which somehow made it more intense. Every gasp swallowed. Every cry muffled against skin. Dawn came too soon, painting the mountains pink and gold. Eli woke to find Clara dressed and sitting by the window, watching the sunrise. Regretting, he asked. She turned, smiled. Planning, if Hartley's right, if we can really go home safely. There's so much to do. The ranch needs work. We need more hands, and the fall market's coming. Already back to business. Someone has to be practical. But she came back to bed, curled against him. Though I suppose we could be impractical a bit longer. Tom's knock interrupted them. Rider coming. Looks like one of Hartley's men. The message was brief. Barrett had been arrested. Dawson was in custody. The territorial marshal had taken control of the town. It was safe to return. That's it? Clara asked. Just like that. It's over. Nothing's ever that simple, Eli said. But it's a start. They rode back to town cautiously, weapons ready. But the streets of Mercy's Bend were quiet, patrolled by federal marshals instead of Barrett's thugs. The Imperial Hotel, where Barrett had held court, now housed the territorial authorities. Hartley met them outside. Mrs. Whitmore? Mr. Slater? Welcome back. Is it true? Clara asked. Barrett's really finished? Finished might be too strong. Detained. Certainly. Charged with numerous crimes. His assets have been frozen pending investigation. The lawyer smiled. It seems Mr. Barrett made enemies of the wrong people. Railroad money talks louder than his ever could. And my ranch? Yours, free and clear. Though I should mention, the Railroad Consortium would still like to discuss purchasing water rights. Legitimate business. Fair prices. Something to consider. Clara looked at Eli. They'd barely discussed the future beyond surviving the present, but he saw the question in her eyes. Would he stay? Was what they'd shared in the line shack something that could last in daylight? We'll think about it, Eli said, taking her hand. Together. The word meant something different now. Not just an alliance against danger, but a promise of shared tomorrows. Clara squeezed his hand, and her smile was answer enough. They had survived. Against all odds, they were alive and free and together. In a land that killed the weak and broke the strong, they'd found something worth the fighting. It wasn't the ending. There would be challenges ahead, decisions to make, a life to build from the ashes of old pain. But standing in the morning sun, hands linked, Eli thought maybe happy endings weren't about everything being perfect. Maybe they were just about finding someone worth facing the imperfect with. 2 weeks had passed since Barrett's arrest, and the Whitmore ranch was slowly returning to life. New hands had been hired, men grateful for work and unbothered by old gossip. The fences were mended, the barn repaired, and Clara had even hired a cook, Mrs. Chen, whose husband worked the vegetable garden. But beneath the surface of normalcy, tension simmered. Barrett might be in jail, but his influence hadn't died. There were still whispers in town, still men who owed him loyalty or money. And then there was Frank Morrison, who disappeared after the night he'd broken in, leaving behind debts and dangerous creditors. Eli found Clara in Nathan's old study, surrounded by ledgers and papers. She'd thrown herself into the work of running the ranch with fierce determination, as if staying busy could ward off the shadows gathering at the edges of their newfound peace. You need to eat, he said, setting down a plate Mrs. Chen had prepared. In a minute, I'm trying to understand Nathan's water calculations. If we're going to negotiate with the railroad, Clara. He took the pen from her hand. The papers will still be here after lunch. She looked up at him, and he saw the exhaustion she'd been hiding, dark circles under her eyes, tension in the line of her shoulders. I can't stop thinking about what Hartley said, about the witnesses who've come forward, all those people Barrett hurt, and Nathan knew. He had to have known. Maybe he did. Then how could he do business with him? How could he sit across from that monster and shake hands? Eli pulled her up from the chair, into his arms. People make compromises. Doesn't make it right. But it's human. Would you make that kind of compromise? I have, during the war, after things I'm not proud of. He stroked her hair. We all carry darkness. Clara, the lucky ones find something bright enough to balance it out. She kissed him, soft and sweet. These past 2 weeks had been a revelation, learning each other in daylight, in ordinary moments. The passion was still there, but tempered now with tenderness, with 1,000 small intimacies of shared space. A rider approaching broke the moment. Through the window, Eli saw Tom escorting someone, a woman, heavily veiled, riding side saddle on a bay mare. Expecting anyone? He asked. Clara shook her head. They went out to meet the visitor, Eli's hand resting casually on his gun. Old habits. The woman dismounted and lifted her veil, revealing a face that might have been pretty if not for the bruises. One eye was swollen nearly shut, her lips split. She was young, maybe 20, with auburn hair and frightened eyes. Please, she said. I need to speak with Mrs. Whitmore. Alone. Anything you have to say? Eli started, but Clara touched his arm. It's all right. Come inside. Miss Garrison. Lily Garrison. Eli tensed. Garrison, as in Wade Garrison, The girl flinched. My husband. Please, I don't have much time. Clara led her to the parlor, shooting Eli a look that said, stay close, but give us privacy. He positioned himself in the hallway, within earshot, but out of sight. Who did this to you? Clara's voice was gentle. Wade. He gets angry when he drinks. More angry lately, since the Barrett deal fell through. I'm sorry, but why come to me? Because you're the only person in 100 miles who stood up to them and lived. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. And because I have information you need. What kind of information? They're planning something. Wade and his associates. The railroad consortium might have backed off, but there are others interested in this land. Men from back east, Chicago syndicates. They don't care about legal niceties. What are they planning? I don't know exactly, but I heard Wade talking about the town meeting tomorrow night, about how after tomorrow, the Whitmore problem would be solved permanently. Eli had heard enough. He entered the room, making Lily jump. This town meeting, what's it about? The territorial governor is sending a representative. Clara explained. To formally recognize the new sheriff and address Barrett's crimes, most of the town will be there. Including you? I plan to attend. Yes, to show that I'm not hiding, that I'm part of this community, which makes it the perfect place for an ambush. Eli turned to Lily. Your husband, how many men does he have? 6, maybe 7, plus whatever local guns they can hire. She twisted her hands. I shouldn't be here. If Wade finds out... You can stay here, Clara offered. We'll protect you. No, he'll look for me here first. I have a sister in Santa Fe. If I can get there. Eli made a decision. Tom will escort you. We'll provide a horse, supplies, money for the journey. I can't pay you back. Not asking you to. Clara stood. But Lily, will you testify? If we survive tomorrow night, would you speak against your husband? The girl touched her bruised face. Yes, I'll testify. While Tom prepared for the journey, Eli and Clara retreated to the study. The weight of what they'd learned settled over them like a shroud. We could leave, Clara said quietly. Tonight, take what we can carry and disappear. Is that what you want? No. But I want you alive more than I want this ranch. And I want both. Eli pulled her close. We've come too far to run now. It could be a trap. Lily could be lying, sent by Garrison to manipulate us. Maybe, but that fear in her eyes was real. Those bruises were real. Clara was quiet for a moment. What do we do? We go to the meeting, but we go ready. He smiled grimly. And we make sure we're not the only ones. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Messages were sent to ranchers who'd suffered under Barrett's rule, men who might stand with them if trouble came. Weapons were cleaned, loaded, positioned. Plans were made for various contingencies. As night fell, Clara found Eli on the porch, checking his rifle for the 10th time. She sat beside him, leaning into his warmth. Tell me about after, she said. After? After tomorrow, after all this is settled. What do you want? He set the rifle aside, considered. Never thought much beyond the next sunrise. Didn't see much point. And now? He pulled her onto his lap, holding her close. I want to see this ranch thrive. Want to hire good men, raise good cattle, maybe breed horses. You've got an eye for bloodlines. That's the ranch. What about us? Want to wake up next to you every day? Want to argue about stupid things and make up after? Want to build something that lasts? Children. The question hung between them. Eli thought of all the ways the world could hurt a child, all the violence and cruelty he'd seen. Then he looked at Clara, brave, stubborn, beautiful Clara, and imagined a daughter with her eyes, a son with her courage. Yeah, he said roughly. Children. She kissed him, deep and promising. Then we'd better survive tomorrow. They made love that night with desperate tenderness, aware it might be their last time. Every touch was memorized, every whispered word a prayer against the coming dawn. Afterward, they lay entwined, neither willing to waste time on sleep. Whatever happens tomorrow, Clara said against his chest, I want you to know that these weeks with you have been worth everything. Worth the fear, the fighting, all of it. Don't talk like that, like you're saying goodbye. I'm saying I love you. In case I don't get another chance, you'll get 1,000 chances. 10,000. He tilted her chin up. We're going to win tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, until Barrett and Garrison and all the rest are just bad memories. Promise? I promise. It was a lie. Perhaps. No one could promise to survive what was coming. But lying there in the darkness, holding the woman who'd brought him back to life, Eli meant it. He would survive, would make her survive, through sheer force of will if necessary. The world had taken enough from both of them. It wouldn't take this. Dawn came pale and hesitant, as if the sun itself was reluctant to begin this day. They dressed carefully. Clara in her best dress, the deep blue one that brought out her eyes. Eli in his cleanest shirt and the black coat that hid his shoulder holster. Ready? He asked. She checked the small pistol in her handbag, lifted her chin. Ready? They rode to town together, Tom and Miguel flanking them, several other ranchers falling in along the way. By the time they reached Mercy's Bend, they were a small but determined force. The town hall was already crowded, voices rising in anticipation. Eli scanned the room, cataloging threats. There, Garrison near the back, trying to look casual. 2 of his men by the side door. Another near the stage where the territorial representative would speak. Too many innocents. Eli murmured to Clara. If shooting starts, then we make sure it doesn't start. They found seats in the middle, surrounded by allies. The room grew hot and close as more people packed in. Eli kept his hand near his gun. Every nerve alert. The territorial representative, a thin man named Paulson, took the stage. He began speaking about law and order, about new beginnings, about justice finally coming to Mercy's Bend. That's when Eli saw it. Movement in the rafters. A glint of metal where metal shouldn't be. Gun! He shouted, pushing Clara down as the first shot rang out. Chaos erupted. Women screamed. Men dove for cover. More shots from different directions. A coordinated attack. Eli drew his Colt, searching for targets in the mayhem. Garrison was moving toward the stage, gun drawn, going for Paulson. Eli realized. Kill the federal man. Blame it on Clara's supporters. Use the chaos to seize control. Eli's shot took Garrison in the shoulder, spinning him around. One of his men turned toward Eli. Raising a rifle, Miguel's shotgun boomed, and the man went down. The rafters! Clara shouted. Eli looked up, saw the sniper drawing a bead on them. No time to aim properly. He fired by instinct. The sniper tumbled from his perch, crashing through chairs below. More of their allies were fighting back now. Tom had organized a defensive position near the doors. The tide was turning. Clara, we need to... Eli turned to find her gone. Panic shot through him until he spotted her near the stage, helping the wounded Paulson to cover. A figure emerged from the smoke, Frank Morrison, wild-eyed and desperate, pointing a gun at Clara's back. You ruined everything, Frank screamed. The debts, the threats, all your fault. Eli moved without thinking, throwing himself between Clara and the gun. The shot was thunderous. Pain bloomed in his side, hot and immediate. He heard Clara scream his name as his legs gave out, but even falling, Eli's aim was true. Frank Morrison crumpled, a red stain spreading across his chest. Then Clara was there, pressing something against Eli's side, her face white with fear. Don't you dare die. You promised we'd have those children. Just a scratch, he managed. Liar. But she was smiling through her tears. The shooting had stopped. Federal marshals were flooding in, taking control. Garrison was in custody. His men dead or captured. It was over. They'd won. See? Eli whispered. Told you. We'd survive. Shut up and let me stop this bleeding. As Clara worked over him, competent and determined, Eli let his eyes drift closed. Not from weakness, but from peace. They'd fought for this, Fought Barrett and Garrison and their own fears. They'd won the right to that future Clara had asked about. The ranch, the arguments, the children. It was a future worth bleeding for, worth living for. And as the doctor arrived and Clara gripped his hand, Eli Slater knew that's exactly what he intended to do, live with her, for as long as the world would let them. The doctor's house smelled of carbolic acid and whiskey. Eli drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of Clara's voice, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading, always there. The bullet had gone deep. The doctor said, "Touch and go." He said, "Prepare yourself." He said. Clara told the doctor to go to hell and kept vigil. "You're too stubborn to die," she whispered during one of his lucid moments, gripping his hand. "You hear me, Eli Slater? Too damn stubborn. Learned from you." He managed. She kissed his knuckles, her tears hot against his skin. "Then learn this too. I won't let you go. Not now. Not ever." 3 days passed in a haze of fever and pain. On the 4th day, Eli woke clear-headed to find sunlight streaming through clean curtains and Clara asleep in a chair beside the bed, still holding his hand. "Hey," he rasped. Her eyes flew open. For a moment she just stared, as if afraid to believe. Then she was kissing him, careful of his bandages but fierce in her relief. "Don't ever scare me like that again," she said against his lips. "No promises. You do tend to attract trouble." "Me?" She pulled back, indignant. "Who threw himself in front of a bullet? Had to protect my investment. Can't collect that $70 a month if you're dead." She laughed, then cried, then kissed him again. "The ranch is safe. Garrison confessed to everything. Nathan's murder, the conspiracy with Barrett, all of it. Paulson survived, and he's recommended federal oversight of the territory until things stabilize. And Barrett, facing trial in Denver. Real judges, real jury. He won't buy his way out of this one." Eli touched her face. "You did it. Saved your ranch. Got justice for Nathan." "We did it." She caught his hand, pressed it to her cheek. "I couldn't have survived any of this without you." "Sure you could. You're the strongest person I know." "Strong is just another word for alone. I don't want to be strong anymore. Eli, I want to be happy." He was quiet for a moment, thinking, "Doc say when I can get out of here?" "Another week, maybe 2. Why?" "Because there's something I need to do, and I'd rather not do it flat on my back." Clara's brow furrowed. "What something?" "The kind of something that involves asking Tom to ride to Denver for a ring." Her breath caught. "Eli, unless you'd rather keep paying me that $70 a month. Though I should warn you, my rates are going up. Hazard pay for all the getting shot." "You're serious?" "As a bullet wound." He struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain. "Clara Whitmore, I've got nothing to offer except a scarred-up body, a questionable past, and a promise to love you till they plant me. But if you'll have me—" "Yes." She was crying again, but smiling through it. "Yes, you fool. Of course, yes." The wedding took place a month later, as soon as Eli could stand upright without wincing. It was a simple affair at the ranch, with Tom and Miguel as witnesses and misses. Chen providing a feast that had the whole county talking. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. Eli wore his best shirt and the new coat Clara had insisted on buying. When the circuit preacher asked if anyone objected, Tom loudly cocked his rifle, which got a laugh and broke the tension. "Do you, Eli, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the preacher asked. "I do." The words came easy. "Sure." "Do you, Clara, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." She squeezed his hands, her eyes bright with tears and joy. "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I pronounce you man and wife." Eli kissed his bride while their friends cheered. It tasted like whiskey and promises and the end of a long, lonely road. That night, in the bedroom that had once been Nathan's, but now held no ghosts, they came together as husband and wife. The passion was familiar now, but no less intense, tempered by tenderness, deepened by the knowledge that this wasn't stolen time, but the beginning of something permanent. My husband, Clara said afterward, testing the words. That sounds strange. Good strange or bad strange? Perfect strange. She traced the scar where Frank's bullet had torn through him. My husband, who takes bullets for me. Once. I took a bullet once. Let's not make it a habit. Agreed. They lay quiet for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, horses nickering, wind in the cottonwoods, the distant howl of a coyote. What are you thinking? Clara asked. About Marcus Cooper, about what he'd say if he could see me now. What would he say? That it was about damn time I stopped just surviving and started living. Eli pulled her close. That maybe this is why I made it out when he didn't, to be here, with you, building something good. I wish I could have met him. He would have liked you, would have said you were too good for me. He would have been right, but she kissed him to take the sting out of it. Fall came to the ranch, painting the mountains gold and red. The water rights were negotiated with the railroad, a fair deal that would bring income without giving up control. New cattle were purchased, the herd growing. 3 more hands were hired, including a young couple who moved into one of the outer cabins. Eli learned to be a rancher instead of just a hired gun. He discovered he had a talent for reading the weather, for knowing when to move the herd to better grazing, for spotting sickness before it spread. The work was hard but satisfying in a way fighting had never been. Clara threw herself into making the ranch profitable. She kept meticulous books, negotiated contracts with army suppliers, established relationships with buyers in Denver and Santa Fe. Together, they were building something that would last. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the valley in white. They were prepared, hay stored, cattle in the near pastures, firewood stacked high. The house was warm and snug, filled with the smell of baking bread and coffee. It was a morning in late December when Clara placed Eli's hand on her still flat stomach. There's something you should know. He stared at her, understanding dawning. You're... The doctor confirmed it yesterday. Late summer. He thinks. Eli pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Joy and terror warred in his chest. Joy at this new life they'd created. Terror at all the ways the world could hurt a child. Are you happy? Clara asked, uncertain. Happy doesn't cover it. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Scared as hell, but happy. Me too, both things. They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other while snow fell outside the windows. It was a perfect moment, warm and safe in theirs. That evening, a rider approached through the snow. Eli tensed out of habit, but it was only the postal carrier with a letter from Santa Fe, from Lily Garrison. Clara read it aloud by the fire. Wade was in prison, convicted of assault and conspiracy. Lily had testified, as promised. She was working as a seamstress now, making a new life. She thanked them for their help, for showing her that standing up to evil was possible. We should write back, Clara said. Tell her our news. Let her know that good things can come after the fighting. You do that. I'll check the stock. Outside, the cold was sharp and clean. Eli made his rounds, ensuring all was secure. It was habit now, this vigilance, but a comfortable one. He wasn't watching for enemies anymore, just tending what was his. The stars were brilliant in the clear sky. Eli thought again of Marcus Cooper, of all the men who died in the war, of the long road that had led him here. He'd come west expecting to die, had instead found reasons to live. When he returned to the house, Clara had hot coffee waiting. They sat by the fire, planning for spring, for the baby, for a future that once seemed impossible. Do you ever miss it? Clara asked. The fighting, the excitement. No, this is excitement enough, wondering if the cattle will make it through winter, if the baby will have your eyes or mine, if we'll get to see our grandchildren on this land, our grandchildren. She smiled. Listen to us, talking like old folks. We earned it, the right to grow old, to be boring, to worry about normal things. I love you, she said simply. Love you too. The fire crackled, warming the room against the winter night. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in peaceful white. The wars were over, the big one that had torn the country apart, the small one that had nearly killed them both. What remained was this: a man and woman who'd found each other against all odds. A ranch wrestled from those who'd steal it, a child growing beneath Clara's heart, and the promise of all the ordinary days to come. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 5 years had passed since that winter morning when Clara told Eli about the baby. The Whitmore Ranch, though folks still called it that out of habit, had become one of the most prosperous in the territory. The house had been expanded, a second story added, painted white with green shutters that Clara insisted on. This morning found Eli on the porch, watching his daughter chase chickens in the yard. Sarah, named for Marcus Cooper's widow, had her mother's sage honey eyes and her father's stubborn streak. At 4 years old, she was already trying to ride the gentler horses, much to Clara's dismay. "Papa, look!" Sarah held up a feather she'd found. "From the big rooster." "That's a fine feather, little one. Your mama might want it for her hat." "Mama's inside being sick again," Sarah announced matter-of-factly. Eli's smile widened. Clara was 3 months along with their second child, suffering the same morning sickness that had plagued her with Sarah. She claimed it was worse this time, which Mrs. Chen insisted meant a boy. Tom Brennan rode up, older now but still sharp-eyed. He'd become foreman after Eli took over managing the ranch's business side. Turned out all those years of reading terrain and tactics translated well to reading market trends and weather patterns. "Boss, we got company coming. That writer fellow from back east." Eli had forgotten. Some journalist from Boston wanted to write about the transformation of the frontier or some such nonsense. Clara had agreed to it, said it was good for people to know that the West was more than gunfights and lawlessness now. "Send him up to the house when he arrives," Eli said. "And Tom, make sure the hands know to keep working normal. Don't want him thinking we're putting on a show." The writer, a thin young man named Theodore Hartwell, arrived an hour later, dust-covered and clearly overwhelmed by the vastness of the landscape. Clara, having conquered her morning sickness, greeted him with the poise of a born hostess. "Mr. Hartwell, welcome to our home. I trust your journey wasn't too arduous?" "It was educational, Mrs. Slater. I had no idea the distances involved." They gave him a tour of the ranch, Eli pointing out the improvements, the new irrigation system fed by the eastern spring, the expanded barns, the separate pastures for different grades of cattle. Sarah tagged along, peppering the rider with questions about Boston. "Is it true you have buildings taller than trees?" she asked. "Some, yes, 5, even 6 stories high." Sarah looked skeptical. "That's silly. Where do the horses go?" That evening, after a dinner where Hartwell tried gamely to match the appetites of men who'd worked cattle all day, he finally asked the question Eli had been expecting. "I've heard stories, Mr. Slater, about troubles here 5 years ago. Barrett, garrison, gunfights in the street." "Old news," Eli said shortly. "Still, it must have been quite dramatic. A war widow fighting to keep her land, a mysterious gunman coming to her aid. Nothing mysterious about it." Clara interjected smoothly. "Eli was a ranch hand who helped me when I needed it. We fell in love, got married, built this life together. The drama, as you call it, was just people being greedy and us refusing to be victims. But the violence was necessary," Eli said, his tone ending that line of inquiry. "Sometimes you fight so your children won't have to." Hartwell scribbled notes. "And now, do you miss the excitement?" Clara laughed. "Mr. Hartwell, have you ever tried to keep a 4-year-old from climbing into the bullpen? Or negotiated with army contractors who think a woman doesn't understand beef prices? Or managed 20 hands during calving season? I assure you, we have all the excitement we can handle." After the writer retired to the guest room, Eli and Clara sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Sarah had finally worn herself out and was asleep in her bed, clutching the feather she'd found. "Think he'll write us fair?" Clara asked. "Don't much care. Let him spin his tales for city folks who'll never see this land. It matters though, the stories people tell. Sarah will grow up hearing them. Then we'll tell her our own. The true ones. Clara leaned against him. Which version? The one where you were a hero who saved me? Or the one where I was too stubborn to run and dragged you into my fight? The one where two broken people helped each other heal? Where they built something good from something bad? I like that version. They sat in comfortable silence, the night sounds of the ranch familiar as breathing. In the distance, a coyote called and was answered by another. The eternal conversation of the wild, continuing despite all the changes civilization brought. Eli. I'm glad you stayed that night, when I came to you in the rain. Best decision I ever made, even if you did look like a drowned cat. She elbowed him. Romantic as always. You want romantic? How about this? He pulled her onto his lap, mindful of her condition. Clara Slater, you're the best thing that ever happened to this worn-out soldier. You gave me purpose when I had none, love when I thought I didn't deserve it, and a life I never dared dream of. Now you're just showing off for the writer. He's inside. This is just for you. She kissed him, soft and lingering. I love you too, even if you do track mud through my clean house and teach our daughter inappropriate songs. One time, I taught her one marching song. She sang it in church. Eli, the minister, nearly fainted. Made Tom laugh, though. The next morning, Hartwell departed with his notebook full of observations. Months later, they received a copy of the article he had written. It was flowery and dramatic, full of purple prose about taming the wild frontier and love-conquering savagery. Load of nonsense, Eli muttered, tossing it aside. But Clara saved it, tucked away with other memories, newspaper clippings about Barrett's trial, the deed to the ranch with both their names, Sarah's first drawing of a horse that looked more like a deformed dog. Years passed. Sarah grew tall and strong, an excellent rider who could rope a calf before she could properly spell her name. Her brother Nathan, named for the man whose death had started it all, was quieter, more thoughtful, preferring books to horses, but tough enough when needed. The territory became a state. The railroad brought more settlers, more civilization. Mercy's Bend grew into a proper town with a school, a library, even a theater. But the Whitmore Ranch remained constant, a piece of the Old West preserved in the new. Eli's hair went gray at the temples, and Clara needed spectacles for reading. They weathered droughts and floods, good years and bad, the loss of old friends and the arrival of grandchildren. Through it all, they held to each other and the land they'd fought to keep. One winter evening, with snow falling soft outside and grandchildren asleep upstairs, Clara found Eli in his study, looking at an old photograph, him and Tom and Miguel from those first days, young and fierce and ready for war. Remembering? She asked, thinking how lucky we were, how easily it could have gone different, but it didn't. She sat on his lap, still a perfect fit after all these years. We won, Eli, not just the fight, but everything after, the life we built, the children we raised, the land we protected. We won it all. No regrets, not a one. You? He kissed her temple, where silver now threaded through the dark hair. Only that I can't do it all over again, every minute of it. Sentimental in your old age. Your fault. You civilized me. Someone had to. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. But inside was warmth and light and love. Everything two fighters had earned with blood and courage and the radical act of choosing each other against all odds. It was enough. It had always been enough. And in the morning, there would be more. More work, more challenges, more ordinary miracles. But tonight, in the circle of each other's arms, Eli and Clara Slater were simply what they'd fought so hard to become. Home. Thank you for joining us around the campfire for this tale of love and survival in the Old West. If you're listening to this story somewhere out in the world, whether it's on a long drive, during your commute, or maybe even by your own campfire, drop a comment and let us know where you are. We'd love to hear from fellow Western story enthusiasts. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of frontier courage. And share your thoughts about Eli and Clara's journey. Did their story touch your heart? What was your favorite moment? Let us know in the comments below.